Now, these stories aren't about woods that are especially emotional and edgy. These woods are a different type of deep. The kind of deep where people get lost and start to see the most horrific things. Creeps and ghosts and ghouls of every variety. Enjoy these allegedly true and scary deep woods stories. Go to darkstories.org to send me your scary experiences, and check out eeriecast.com to listen to all my terrifying episodes. Now, let's begin. Dark Occultists at the Hermitage, from Frankie Gotz. This is an encounter I had with a satanic cult, practicing dark occult rituals at a location that my friends and I were at, doing a ghost hunt. We just had picture cameras with us, nothing else. No camcorders or audio recorders. This happened when I was around the age of 18. The year was 2006, give or take. My friends and I had heard about this place called the Hermitage on the outskirts of Hamilton, Ontario. The place has a long history that I cannot fully cover for the sake of time, but there are legends of a suicide that took place on the property. It was a large residence, a huge stone mansion, which is now a ruins in the middle of a forest. The story goes it caught on fire, and now the remnants sit aging in that forest. It has large stone walls and not much more. It has a few forest trails leading to it. And of course, it's believed to be haunted. I've gone to this place a few times before this experience, taking pictures in and around the ruins. But we never caught anything special, and we never experienced anything paranormal there. To be honest, it didn't feel haunted at all. I told some older ghost hunting acquaintances about me doing ghost hunts at the Hermitage, and I was forewarned not to go there late at night because of rumors of cults going there and performing dark rituals involving animal sacrifice. They believed it was haunted by demons and also believed that possibly these people could be dangerous. At the time, I didn't know what to think of it. I told the person that I've already gone there a few times at night and never ran into any Satanists, or whatever you want to call them, and we never experienced any paranormal activity, so I brushed off this warning. Even though we didn't have any frights from ghosts, it was still a cool and eerie place to go at night. When one travels to the Hermitage's entrance, it is blocked off, and one cannot park their car in the grounds. But back then, just a little ways away from the location, down the road, there was an area to park on the side of the road, enough space for 2 cars. We traveled there in a black van with my baby mama and friends and parked the van at this little parking spot. There were 4 of us. We all got out of the van and proceeded to go into the darkness onto the trail that led to the Hermitage. It was about a 7-minute walk through dark forest. It was actually wintertime as well, so the trails were covered in snow and ice. The trail wasn't all on flat ground either. The trail would bring you up and down hills. It was a little eerie, but nothing too crazy. I didn't feel like we were being watched or anything like that, but walking through a forest in the middle of nowhere late at night is naturally scary in any location, even if it's not haunted. As we finally made it to the Hermitage ruins, we did our normal thing, just walking around, taking pictures, and sometimes talking to the wind, hoping the spirits would hear us in attempts to try to invoke paranormal activity. This involves asking them to make a noise, or for them to show themselves, and sometimes even taunting them. But like the other nights there before, nothing happened, and we didn't capture any cool anomalies in pictures. Now, from what I remember, there are only 2 trails that lead to the Hermitage ruins, but I could be wrong, as it's been a while since I've been there. To be honest, after the experience I'm about to share with you, I didn't go there for many years. But if you were to look at the Hermitage from topographic view, like Google Maps or blueprints, picture the entrance from the road being at the bottom, and a trail to the right and a trail to the left. If you were to go to the back of the Hermitage, there is no trail, just dense forest. My baby ma, Friends and I were at the very back because we heard this is where the animal sacrifices occur, so we thought maybe we could capture some activity. Perhaps take a picture of a demon or an animal spirit. We took a bunch of pictures and still nothing. Now here comes the scary part. As we were getting bored of this location, we collectively decided we should head back to the trail we came from to walk through the forest back to the van. As we were making our way towards the trail, we spotted 5 individuals in black robes walking, seemingly in a trance. They were almost robotic, like how soldiers march all synchronistically. All 5 of these guys' legs moved at the same time. It gave off a weird vibe. Then all at once they stopped. We could see the sides of them, as they were turned at a 90-degree angle to the right of us, while being literally right in front of us. I estimated probably only 10 feet from us. A few seconds later, they all turned at the same time. Again, it was very bizarre. It was perfect synchronization. When they turned, they stared at us for a few moments. We couldn't see their faces because it was so dark. We could only see the scary, dark silhouettes of their robes and hoods. I noticed the dude in the middle had what appeared to be 2 long metal bars, one in each hand. As they stared at us, the guy in the middle with the bars started banging the bars together. By the 3rd ding, we made a run for it. We ran to the trail and started running into the forest. Remember, I told you this is in winter, and the trail was covered in ice and snow, and it wasn't flat due to hills. So we were running, slipping, falling. Up until that point, I've never been so scared of human beings in my entire life. I legitimately feared for our lives, because those weird dudes in black robes at like 2 in the morning, in the middle of a forest, gave chase to us through the woods. All the while we slipped and fell and never looked back, our fear only intensifying. I swear, while we ran, there were more of them in those woods. I got glimpses of them peeking their heads out from behind trees. I don't know if my fear produced hallucinations and my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was very dark after all. But I swear, I saw them. We would fall again running down a hill, almost tobogganing down the hill on our butts. It was intense and felt as if ages passed before we got back to the safety of our van. But there was a scary surprise waiting for us at the van. Parked beside our van was a car with what looked to be a deranged woman with blonde hair and bugged-out eyes, turning her high beams on and off repeatedly and frantically, all while giving us this death stare. She looked to be around 30. I theorized she was trying to signal the cult members to our location. We all hopped in the van, and the driver turned on the engine. We backed out and booked it out of there. The lady in the car tailed us, and we didn't lose her until we got to the city, where she slowed down and just turned around. Hearing this, you probably won't get the same feeling of fear that we felt, but being there and experiencing this was literally the scariest moment I've ever had, being terrified of other human beings. I guess I should have listened to my ghost hunting acquaintances. Sometimes it's not the paranormal we should fear, but people who use their free will to commit harm to people and animals. And if you're one of those cult members listening to this who chased us, I hope we never meet again. The Clearing, from Black Cat 1206. One Saturday when I was around 13, my uncle came around with his girlfriend and my 2 younger cousins. Our other 2 cousins were staying at the flat for the weekend, and a further younger female cousin had asked Mom if she could also stay. This was a regular occurrence for all us kids. The weekends and school holidays were a free-for-all, a constant stream of kids staying at one place or another making makeshift beds with beanbags and floor cushions, or just crashing out on the floor with sleeping bags. My mom and aunties all used to joke that in the holidays their homes turned into regular old doss house. Apart from my 5 cousins and I, my friend Jay was there. He too was at our flat every weekend, and his parents knew he would be okay. Mom had the reputation for being cool, yet very strict. We all hung out together, had a sandwich and drank and played on the Sega. Then Mom and my uncle's partner said we should all go for a walk. Everyone thought it would be a great idea, so the 10 of us set out. The 3 adults decided that we should go to Donkey Woods, which is a bit of green wildland, owned by the council, much like Heathland. As kids, we used to go over a lot in the spring, summer, and autumn, on our own or with family, and it was reasonably safe and kid-friendly, and it still felt wild enough to make you feel adventurous and not in West London. We all walked the half-mile down the road from the flats to Donkey Woods, where we walked along the river until we got further into the woods, and while Mum and my uncle and his partner all sat down to have a cigarette, us 7 kids continued exploring. As I previously mentioned, we all knew Donkey Woods really well, and were totally at ease and comfortable over there, so we weren't expecting anything unusual or creepy at all. For us, it was just another mid-August late Saturday afternoon, and we were just messing around. My cousin T, my friend Jay, and I were all talking, and suddenly the other 4 kids came running up. They hadn't been too far away, just slightly further down the river. They were all out of breath and looked a little rattled. The 4 of them told us that they had seen something weird in one of the small clearings. They wouldn't tell us what, they just said, "You have to come and see." We all thought it was just a major wind-up, but when we got to the clearing, our mood changed quickly, not to fear, more to a sense of unsettling apprehension. In the middle of the clearing were 3 small tents in a rough triangle, and in the middle of the tents was a small, still smoldering fire. Around the edges of the clearing were several small dead birds, sparrows, I think. The whole scene was very unnatural and eerie, and I felt a distinct drop in temperature, most likely my imagination, but still quite evident. Now, the rough sleepers of the area did use Donkey Woods as a base, but not in that particular place of the woods, as it was too close to the main road, and the homeless people avoided harassment and abuse from certain unpleasant individuals by going further into the woods to prevent any kind of confrontation. Quick note to the audience: rough sleepers refers to those who may or may not be homeless, but are living or staying overnight in unsheltered, unsafe, or open-air environments. Continuing on. The homeless people who lived over Donkey Woods also didn't use tents. They would make a shelter from pieces of wood and plastic sheeting. And Donkey Woods isn't a place where people go camping recreationally, so we felt there was something very strange about the scene in this clearing. I told the 4 younger ones to go and get the adults. While they were gone, me, Jay, and T didn't move. T, who was and still is tough as nails, was completely colorless. You couldn't see her freckles at all. I didn't even move my wheelchair around the area, as I normally would have done, and Jay just kept saying, "What the actual F?" When the adults came back with the other kids, they were clearly unnerved by the odd scene as much as we were, and it was soon agreed upon by everyone that we should leave the clearing and Donkey Woods immediately. The creepiest part of the incident was the next morning, when my uncle went to see my other uncle, and together they went down over Donkey Woods to look around more. They went to that clearing, but there was nothing there. Not even marks in the ground from tent poles, no sign of fire, and no tiny dead birds. Sasquatch in the Missouri Woods. From Anonymous. This is my little brother's story. My brother's encounter started at night when he and a friend of his, John, decided to go night fishing. John and my brother have known each other a long time and have always hung out, though they would eventually get distant from each other, and I'm not sure why. Anyway, they were driving down an extremely remote road in the middle of the woods when John's truck ran out of gas. They were a couple of miles from a boat dock, and John, being the mischievous person he was, said they would just steal some gas from a boat at the docks near the water. Now, I'm usually pretty attuned to when my brother is lying or pulling a prank, but the fear and confusion in his eyes was solid when he related this to me. They had made it probably close to a mile down the road, and he says the woods went so quiet he could hear John's heart beating. Suddenly, without warning, John shoved my brother down to the ground and ran so fast he was out of sight before my brother even hit the ground. According to my brother, when he looked up, he was alone. Then all he heard from the woods on the side of the road were these massive footsteps getting closer to him. So close, he said it had to be right at the tree line on the road. When the footsteps stopped, he said he saw an enormous figure staring at him. It then crouched down, giving what he said was a low and long growl. At that point, my brother hit fight or flight, and he scrambled to his feet, running towards where John had ran off to. He says he thinks he startled the creature when he jumped to his feet, because it made a surprised noise and ran away at an unbelievable speed. He eventually caught up to John, who was walking back with the gas can. He cussed John like no other for leaving him to that creature, and asked why he'd done it. John said he panicked when the woods went silent, and he heard the footsteps before my brother heard them. He just reacted and shoved my brother down. At this point, they stopped arguing, because a rock came flying from the woods, hitting the boat dock near the water. This time, they both took off uphill at top speed. They both made it to the truck and hopped inside. But they quickly realized they had to put the gas in the truck still. My brother said John asked him to go to fill up the truck, to which my brother cussed him again and basically told him to go screw himself. John got out of the truck and began to fill it up when another rock came flying from the woods, hitting the wheel well of the truck next to John's hand so hard it almost punched a hole in the darn thing. John dropped the gas can, hopped in the truck, and just floored it out of there. They made it back safe, and after that, they drifted apart. And to this day, my brother swears on everything this story is true. And to me, it seems like one heck of a possible encounter. I'm tempted to go there myself and check things out. Bigfoot Encounter from Lanella. This is my dad's story. My dad has never been the type to lie, and this encounter still scares him to this day. In his early 20s, he loved hunting. One of his favorite hunting spots is a place called Panther Creek in southwestern Virginia. One morning, he decided to go hunting with his uncle, but they separated and went to opposite sides of the mountain. He went to his favorite spot, but this time was different. He felt as if something was off because the forest was very quiet. There were no birds chirping or bugs making any noise, which is odd, as it was around 5 or 6 a.m. For a bit of context, he was sitting up on a small hill in the woods, surrounded by trees, facing a large clearing or field about 50 yards down below him. After waiting about an hour for a deer, he saw one walk out of the trees into a big clearing. It stopped to eat. My dad aimed his gun and fired. The deer dropped down. He watched for a minute before getting up to go retrieve it, but before he was able to get to the deer, a large creature with a long brown reddish fur walking on 2 legs ran from the trees, grabbed the deer by the leg, and ran back into the forest. Keep in mind, my dad is almost 6'4", and this thing would have towered over him if he were next to it. He stood there in shock from what he just witnessed. There was no other explanation for what had grabbed his deer, as it's highly unlikely a gorilla was living up in the Appalachian Mountains. He grabbed his things and hurried out of there as fast as possible, and when he got back to the truck, his uncle was waiting on him. He told his uncle the story, as his uncle was more like a father to him than anyone. His uncle just laughed it off and told him it was probably a black bear. But that thing was not a black bear. Fast forward 10 years and my dad got a job working as a long-haul truck driver. He was coming home one night and just started talking to the only other truck on the road on his CB radio. They started talking about where they were going, and my dad mentioned he was going home after a long week to our hometown. The other guy, let's call him John, said he used to hunt up there. My dad said he loved hunting up there too, but keep in mind my dad never told his story about what he saw to this John, not yet. But then John proceeded to say, "Yeah, I used to hunt up there until I saw something." Shivers went down my dad's spine, and he asked what he had seen. John told him that about 5 or 6 years before that, he and his wife were driving down a road near Panther Creek looking for deer, when all of a sudden a large creature with reddish-brownish fur jumped down from a bank in front of them. It looked right at his wife, and she screamed, somehow startling the creature because it turned and ran down off the side of the road. My dad was shocked. His entire family had always made fun of him for that story, and now he had met someone who had seen the same thing. Fast forward another 5 years or so. My dad's uncle called him and told him, "They're looking for your Bigfoot." My dad was mad because he was tired of no one believing him, but his uncle told him to turn on the TV and go to a certain channel. When he did, it was an episode of Finding Bigfoot in Panther Creek, Virginia. My dad is now 51 and has never been the type to be scared by something like that. He's always been a very tough person, but to this day, he refuses to go up there anymore. The Hole, from Electronic Bank 4785. This happened a while back when I was 10 years old. I lived in a neighborhood with large white houses and thick woods surrounding them. For an image on what it looked like, there are 5 houses on the right and 4 on the left, and a curve at the end of the road that led to another area. As I said, this entire area was surrounded by woods, and at night it was a new level of creepy. I had 4 friends, Wyatt, Timothy, Grant, and Troy. We obviously liked the woods, as we had lived there for a while. We were on good terms and went out daily to hang out in the woods. My house is the second on the left of the street, and Timothy's was the last on the right. His house was on a corner, 2 sides boxed in by dark woods. In one corner there was a clearing, where we built our structures. We had 5 teepees, 2 lean-tos, and of course, the hole that is the subject of this story. The hole was dug the summer before and was about 6 feet deep. It was usually filled with water, and we didn't care to drain it. We never went into the woods alone because of safety, and because we were all too scared to anyway. I think it was on a Tuesday when we were having a sleepover at Timothy's house. Me and Wyatt were walking from his house carrying sleeping bags, snacks, and flashlights. The flashlights we were carrying were on full battery, and we knew that because we just replaced them and tested them beforehand. The batteries were at 98%. When we got there, we dumped our bags and snacks and headed back into the woods. We decided to add more sticks to stabilize the teepees. Then we dug the hole a little bit deeper. I got one of his shovels from our storage bin and started digging. Time passed, and it started getting dark. We went back inside then, talking for a while, then went to sleep. The first weird thing that happened was when I woke up. I had to use the bathroom. It was then that I saw Troy staring out the window, intent on something near the forts. I asked him what he was looking at, and at first he said nothing. I didn't care, so I got up to use the bathroom and went back to sleep. If you hadn't already guessed, Timothy's room is one of 2 facing the woods. I woke up once again because Wyatt and Troy were staring out the window, looking in the same direction. Instead of denying to tell me anything, Troy whispered to me to look near the hole. I looked over, and I could just barely make out something dark crawling out of our hole. I was stunned, and then I started to giggle to myself. Laughing, I told him it's just high schoolers, up late at night again, and to, for God's sake, go back to sleep. They looked at me with a glare and asked me, "Do you know what time it is?" My laughter stopped. I looked over at the alarm clock. It was after midnight. Even the high schoolers don't stay up that late. I told them to go back to sleep anyway, but they said they wanted to go check it out. I couldn't argue, because technically they weren't alone. I heard their muffled footsteps walk down the stairs, and then the door quietly shut. I looked outside, and I saw the bright beams of light waving near the edge of the woods. They got to the woods, and all of a sudden the flashlights began to flicker. They dimmed, then totally went out. Under the light of the moon, I could see their worried faces speed-walking back to the house. I was worried, even more because of the fact there was movement near the hole. I ran downstairs, grabbing my shoes and one of their flashlights, and I ran outside. Just as I exited the garage, they came bursting in. I could tell they were panicked, yet they didn't want to show it. We went back up to the bedroom and locked the door. Timothy was sleeping, but we woke him up to tell him that someone, or something, was out there. Timothy had the same reaction I had at first, but we told him to look at the hole for a few minutes. After a minute or so, the smile on his face faded. He slowly turned and asked what the heck that was, and we told him that we had no idea. We decided to go out for an expedition to look for it. We grabbed our flashlights, now oddly working again, and we headed out. We searched for what felt like hours, but finally we came back in, our search inconclusive. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was, but I think that's the reason we abandoned that section of the woods for years. Black Cat in the Wombat Forest, from iBone. This happened in the autumn of 2008, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. For context, I live in rural Victoria, Australia, on a block of land with about 40 acres of bush. It was the school holidays when this story took place. I was spending a few nights at my grandma's house, about an hour's drive north of my place. She lived on a similar bush block, which bordered onto the Wombat State Forest, a rather large forest consisting of many ridges and gullies. She had 2 dogs at the time, and as I didn't have dogs back home, I loved to play with them. I arrived at her house in the afternoon, eager to spend some time with the dogs and my grandma. We loved to explore the bush around her house, and always encountered wildlife there. Usually kangaroos, koalas, echidnas, and lots of cool birds. Directly in front of her house was a sloping gully with a creek running through it. The weather was cool and breezy, so we decided to go for a walk before the sun set, so we could get back home before dinner. The dogs, Tabby and Tilly, were barking in excitement, as they loved walks. As we entered the forest, there seemed to be animals everywhere, birds mainly, and they were calling in every direction. We walked down the steep bank to the creek and crossed an old log, which had been lying there for years. The dogs were loving it and ran up the other bank, chasing a mob of kangaroos. As we walked, we curiously looked at every mushroom, orchid, and natural wonder we could find, the most fascinating being a cocoon from an emperor gum moth. After an hour or so of walking, we turned around, calling the dogs and whistling for them. It was getting colder, and the thought of the warm fire had us both wanting to go back. At about halfway back, Tilly started barking vigorously. She was going crazy, running up and down the gully. Although she liked to chase the foxes and kangaroos, she seemed far more terrified than usual. My grandma was visibly confused and apprehensive upon seeing this behavior. "Tilly!" she yelled, and clapped her hands, but no response, just more barking and running around. It was at that point when the bracken across the creek began to shake and tremble, and a dark creature emerged. At first I thought it was a wallaby, but then I noticed its gait. It was walking, not hopping. "Let's get inside," my grandma said nervously. yet we couldn't leave Tilly out there by herself. The creature began to emerge further, and it was then that I was able to identify it. A huge cat, easily the size of a leopard. Pitch black in color, with the characteristic kink at the end of its tail. I began to feel sick, knowing that it could be on top of me within seconds. We hurried back to the house and made sure the dogs were safe. At dinner, I asked my grandma about it, and she told me there had long been rumors of a black panther roaming the area and killing people's pets. The dogs were staring out the window, still whimpering and barking, but I never saw the cat again. Scarily enough, a few months later when I visited again, Tilly had huge scratches on her back, and although neither me nor my grandmother knew what did it, we knew Tilly was likely lucky to be alive.